Welcome to the Beau Show. Some of you may know, but not all of you, that the Winter Olympics have just begun in Beijing, China. This is the second Olympic Games that we have had in the COVID era, after the 2020 Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo, which were delayed until 2021. The Tokyo Games were largely held behind closed doors, with no public spectators, the first time that has ever happened. Asia has been the site of the past 3 Olympic Games, with South Korea, Japan, and now China hosting. China, as we know, has been very much in the spotlight due to the coronavirus, which originated in Wuhan. And now, 2 years later, we are learning more and more about its origins and the lab leak theory, which was once just considered a conspiracy theory, but now seems like the most plausible explanation. So how ironic is it that Beijing is hosting these 2022 Olympics with all these health and safety protocols amidst a continued pandemic that originated in this very country? Also, it's worth noting that Beijing was chosen after the clear frontrunner, Oslo, Norway, bowed out after reports came out about the International Olympic Committee wanting luxury treatment in Norway with special roads, palatial cocktail parties, and control over all advertising. Because Norway is a democracy that does not own all ad space everywhere, the Norwegian parliament began indicating that it would not approve this Olympic bid. The largest Norwegian newspaper said it did not want to spend money on the IOC apparatchiks. Apparatchik is a term usually used to describe communists. So isn't it ironic that Oslo pulls its bid amidst this controversy, and who is awarded the bid? Beijing, the site of some of the world's most prominent and devastating communism. So the IOC wanted a type of totalitarian, royal treatment by dominating all ad space. And Norway said, no thank you, we don't do that kind of a thing. And where does the IOC go instead? To China, where the government controls everything. Many countries have decided to opt for a diplomatic boycott, so they will not be sending any of their leaders to the Games. Those countries are Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, India, Kosovo, Lithuania, Taiwan, the UK, and the United States. I do find another irony that Australia and Canada are not sending diplomats, yet their own leaders have faced extreme criticism for highly authoritarian moves, especially Scott Morrison, who got involved in the booting of the world's #1 tennis player, Novak Djokovic, for not being vaccinated. In Canada, of course, Trudeau is cowering while their truckers protest in Ottawa over vaccine mandates. But both countries are doing a diplomatic boycott over China. Now let's shift to the opening ceremony in Beijing, which was odd enough in and of itself. There was a portion of it where they used John Legend's cover of John Lennon's iconic song, Imagine, which of course beholds this line.
And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer.
Imagine there's no heaven, no religion too. This is, of course, is a leftist dream. But in China, it's even deeper. You see, in China, religion is not an option. The state is the religion. So they are skeptical of any religion. It's why Christians, Muslims, and those who practice Falun Dafa are persecuted, imprisoned, and tortured. So for the opening ceremony to choose this piece of music, as iconic as it is, carries significant irony to it. And then came the snowflakes, figuratively and literally. Nothing like hordes of people worshiping one big giant snowflake, is there? In the earlier part of the snowflake sculpture, the individual snowflakes fell. And see if you can catch this. Did you catch it? I bet you didn't. Watch again. They make a point to show that Hong Kong is part of China. And listen to the NBC commentary of this.
And now a return to the snowflake theme we have seen throughout tonight's show. And Jingsu, our professor, we know what the snowflake symbolizes here in the West. What do you suppose the intent is here?
Well, director Zhang Yimou said that he wanted to bring the East and West together in the image of the snowflake. And he took the inspiration from the English saying, "No two snowflakes are alike," and a line from a 8th century Chinese poem that describes a snowing canopy as a setting for a gathering. And you might notice that each spoke of the snowflake, instead of crystal, is actually the shape of a Chinese knot that you actually see in many spring festival ornaments. So what is being conveyed here is that, like a snowflake, this is a unique coming together of friends and peoples to be celebrated for their differences and commonality.
This is one of many instances where NBC kind of whiffed when it came to addressing Chinese propaganda and abuses. The director of the ceremonies is Zhang Yimou, who also directed the acclaimed 2008 Games in China. Take a listen to what he said to CGTN, China's state-run TV network.
我们反映出浪漫。如果在一个大型的一个开幕式上，我们反映出一种浪漫的情怀，其实就是文化自信最好的一个表现。也就是说，人们幸福了，人们安居乐业了，他就有了浪漫的心；人们自信了，他就有了浪漫的心。浪漫是很高的境界。那你看我们的唐诗，对吧？盛唐之下才会有那么浪漫的诗句。浪漫很难做到，浪漫很难做到。
Now, what is interesting about this is that he's doing this interview on state-run media. But another irony is that he speaks of the romantic poetry of the Tang Dynasty. The Chinese Communist Party decimated any culture that existed prior to the CCP's takeover. And indeed, the Tang Dynasty was a tremendous area of cultural flourishment. This is why the American-based traditional Chinese dance ensemble Xin Yun celebrates. But Xin Yun is banned in China because it is both religious and traditional. And while Yimou's direction is technically beautiful and brilliant with all the amazing LED screens and graphics, you lose romanticism with the backdrop of what is happening in China. It's no accident that cross-country skier Dinigir Yilamujang was chosen to light the Olympic flame. He is of Uyghur Muslim descent, the very ethnic group that has been forced into labor camps in China. To many people, this was President Xi Jinping's slap in the face to those countries who diplomatically boycotted the Beijing Olympics. But this is an interesting position that the Comcast-owned NBC is in, because they have broadcasters such as Savannah Guthrie, who was all over Donald Trump in their interview, but has to play nice with China. They also have Mike Tirico, who is clearly reading off a carefully written script in teleprompter. NBC likely feels that if they push too hard, China will ice them out, to use a Winter Olympics theme. You may recall that Russia is still banned from the Olympics due to a previous doping scandal. So Russian athletes cannot compete under the flag of Russia, but rather the Russian Olympic Committee, or ROC for short. There are 215 of them competing, and as part of the ban, Russian officials cannot attend the Olympics unless they are invited by the host country. At the Beijing opening ceremony, that's exactly what Xi Jinping did. He invited Vladimir Putin to be his guest. And we all know about the Russia-Ukraine conflict right now and how that looms like a dark cloud. Check out this clip of Putin as Ukraine is introduced. Do you see how the ironies just keep piling up? And to add to that, There have been already over 300 COVID cases reported inside the Olympic bubble. This could certainly spell trouble, especially after so much ado has been made about vaccinated athletes. In addition, China stands as an outlier when it comes to environmental concerns. They thumbed their nose at the recent COP26 climate conference in the UK. And China continues to build coal plants, while the rest of the world thought that the Paris Climate Accord would stop the planet from warming. For a broadcaster like NBC, not to bring this up is willful, because when Los Angeles hosts the Olympics in 2028, you better believe there will be something made of that, even though the US has cut carbon emissions by quite a bit. Take a look at this photo of where the freestyle skiing event is being held. Right next to some big, lovely, great nuclear reactors. They even put the logo on the plant. Many say that the theme song that China used for their Olympic bid is also eerily similar to the song Let It Go from Disney's Frozen. Here's a video that compares them side by side. See what you think.
雪在下，长城内外大好河山，一幅画，整装待发，约定天地之大。Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. 激情的约会，用心召唤你我他。
Of course, the biggest elephant in the room is the Uyghur Muslim genocide. In fact, the leaked 2019 Xinjiang papers by the New York Times showed the CCP's internal documents about how they handle Uyghurs and put them into detention camps, of course. China has also persecuted Christians and the tens of millions who practice forms of religion rooted in Buddhism. In February, the Chinese-owned Global Times paper said that any country that initiates a boycott of the Games could face serious sanctions. Now, that doesn't seem to be the spirit of romantic love that the director was aiming for, does it? It's highly ironic to quote the prolific Tang Dynasty era of romance, while China persecutes religious people. And then let's look at the media coverage itself. China has sabotaged the printing press of the Epoch Times in Hong Kong many times. And then, just as the Olympics were getting going, this happened to a Dutch reporter.
We gaan naar China, naar onze correspondent Sjoerd den Daas. Sjoerd, jij staat vlakbij het stadion. Wat gaat China de komende uren laten zien?
Ja. 哎，稍等一会儿，往前在新闻联播。Ja, we worden hier inmiddels, je merkt het, al weggetrokken. We zijn net ook al bij een ander gebied weggezet. Dus ik vrees dat wij later even bij je moeten terugkomen. Dat kan halen, ja.
Dat denk ik ook, Sjoerd. We gaan door met het volgende onderwerp. Ja.
The Chinese authorities just drag him off air during a live shot, and they don't care. Sounds like the reporter got pushed from another spot just before this, too. This is quite typical for China. The media is not allowed to show the real China. All media is state-run. So even the Chinese people do not get the real story. This is one of the reasons for the formation of the Epoch Times, for scenarios just like this. The International Olympic Committee called this an unfortunate situation. And what a weak response that is. This all falls on them. They chose Beijing. And Beijing is the only city to host both a summer and a winter Olympics. Why did they pick Beijing, especially after they demanded royal treatment in Oslo? Why did they say nothing when Xi invited Putin, when Russia has been banned due to doping? These are more of the ironies of this particular Olympics. And many are also remembering the sudden disappearance of Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai, whom I covered in a previous episode, after she claimed that a Chinese official had sexually assaulted her. There are still major concerns about her well-being. But the Women's Tennis Association pulled all tournaments out of China as a result of this, which is a pretty big deal and also a bold reaction. And then there is the issue of the conditions of the COVID quarantine hotels. Russian biathlon competitor Valeria Vaznetsova tested positive for COVID and as a result was being held in China's quarantine hotels. She said on Instagram, quote, "My stomach hurts, I'm very pale, and I have huge black circles around my eyes. I want all this to end. I cry every day. I'm very tired," unquote. She also said that her bones are sticking out because it was impossible to eat the food that they were serving her. Those in isolation complain about cleanliness, quality of food, poor Wi-Fi, and simply unacceptable conditions. Over 350 participants have tested positive for COVID. They say they're talking to the IOC, but once again, I think I've laid out a case already for how lackluster and compromised the IOC is. They wanted supreme treatment in Oslo, and now we see how the athletes are being treated in Beijing. Another competitor, Belgian skeleton athlete Kim Mielmans, posted a tearful video when the Chinese authorities sent her out of the Olympic Village to isolate, who after originally testing positive had several negative tests. Take a look at this video.
Hi everybody. Some of you have read the good news that I was sent out of the isolation facility. We thought this meant I was allowed to return to the Olympic Village and will be treated maximum as a close contact. On the way to the village, we did not turn to the village, but the ambulance went to another facility where I am now. I am supposed, my NOC got surprised by this decision as well. I'm supposed to stay here for another 7 days with 2 PCRs a day and no contact with anybody else. I am allowed to slide alone. We are not even sure I will ever be allowed to return to the village. And obviously this is very hard for me. So I ask you all to give me some time to consider my next steps, because I'm not sure I can handle 14 more days and the Olympic competition while being in this isolation. Thank you.
I mean, this is tough to think about. Even after negative tests, they moved her out of the village into more isolation where she couldn't properly prepare and train for competition. If you've spent your whole life, in at least the last 4 years, training for the Olympics, and this happens, that's just unacceptable. Athletes have to have their heads in the game, and we all know what depression and anxiety can do to an athlete, or any person for that matter. Things seem to have improved since then, but it's almost unfathomable that conditions like this would be even happening in the first place. And then there's the irony of some of the competition itself. Beverly Zhu is a 19-year-old figure skater who was born in California, but is competing in the Olympics for China. She took a hard fall in competition, slamming into the wall, and also stumbled on a triple loop combination. She knew that the Chinese would be embarrassed by this because many were even surprised at her selection for competition. Many Chinese took to Weibo, their heavily monitored social media app, to express frustration. This performance by her knocked the Chinese from 3rd to 5th place, barely advancing them to the freestyle portion of competition. Zhu's father is a leading artificial intelligence expert who returned to China to lead research there. It is ironic to me, not in a haha sort of way, but just ironic that an American-born figure skater would want to compete for China, considering all we know about them. I know that athletes can compete for whomever they wish, but for an American to compete for China just seems counterintuitive. One is for freedom, the other is clearly not. On the flip side of this, American-born skier Eileen Gu just won a gold medal in the freestyle big air competition, and she won the gold for China, not the USA. What's odd is that the IOC requires athletes to hold passports for the country that they represent. So we don't know if Gu renounced her American citizenship or completed a naturalization process. But China does not allow dual citizenship. Gu has dodged the question multiple times after the race, and China is praising her. If she wants to form national friendships, as she says, start with the CCP, Eileen. Now let's examine what some of the fearless, or rather fearful, leaders have said about the Beijing Olympics. There's some more ironies to behold. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made some rather interesting statements. Take a listen.
I would say to our athletes, you're there to compete. Do not risk incurring the anger of the Chinese government because they are ruthless. I know there is a temptation on the part of some to speak out while they are there. I respect that, but I also worry about what the Chinese government might do.
So Pelosi is encouraging the athletes not to exercise their freedom of speech. Granted, they are in a country that does not permit freedom of speech, but if the Chinese crack down hard on athletes on the world stage after the whole Peng Shuai situation, the blowback would be monumental. It's also ironic that Pelosi was highly supportive of the protest of the summer of 2020 after George Floyd and the BLM riots, and felt that those protests were not just legitimate, but peaceful. Is Pelosi a spokesperson for the CCP? I thought silence was violence. No? This just seems like the most counterintuitive thing one of our leaders could say. I mean, just imagine if Trump were still president, what he'd say. Because he loves sports, I'm sure that he wouldn't want to hurt their ability to compete and win on behalf of the United States. But at the same time, he would probably encourage them to speak out, however they wish to. We know that a guy like Boston Celtics player Enes Kanter, who changed his name to Enes Freedom, would speak out because he already has. We know how the Women's Tennis Association feels, especially after the Peng Shuai disappearance. So why can't our other athletic groups and leaders do the same? Why can't the IOC? 6 U.S. senators called for the games to be moved. Even U.S. skier Michaela Schifrin said she shouldn't have to choose between her morals and her job due to the human rights issues at stake. The IOC has tried to maintain neutrality by saying that awarding a host country does not mean that it agrees with its politics, its government, or its rights abuses. Yet the IOC certainly sets standards of non-discrimination when it's convenient to do so. China, of course, benefits from all of this. It mobilized its social media channels to promote government-sponsored messaging and shut down any dissent. Now you know why our American social media channels start to look exactly like the CCP when they get in the business of censorship and subjective banning. What they did to Trump is exactly what China would have done. In fact, look at Olympic speed skater Huang Yuting from Taiwan. She wore an outfit that said China on it recently, which received a lot of backlash from the Taiwanese, who consider themselves independent from China, but are only able to compete as Chinese Taipei. However, given the fact that China still holds them hostage essentially, Taiwan doesn't want to poke the bear, or tiger, since we are in the year of the tiger, to formally change its Olympic name because China could then revoke its membership. That's the challenge of what they face, that they cannot even compete with national pride because of what China could do. According to Sports Illustrated, NBC is on track for the lowest rated Winter Olympics in history. Now they're going to try to find all kinds of ways to spend that, such as COVID. But when you have an Olympic Games that are so far away in terms of time zone, and also a place that has a lot of negativity towards it, you're not going to come out a winner. Furthermore, NBC has been tepid in its commentary. It's walking on eggshells. I mean, imagine if Trump were the commentator for NBC. These Olympics are terrible, sad, such low ratings, boring, everybody agrees. If they had had the Olympics at Trump-Doral, we'd be watching Sean White with a big juicy steak. But no, they had to come here where the pollution is terrible, they're ripping us off in trade, and I've got nowhere to play golf. Everybody knows, as I'm sure you do, that sleepy Joe Biden is owned by China. I want to say it again, China. By the way, has anyone seen Hunter Biden? Is he off hitting the slopes with some of that booger sugar? I mean, that would be entertaining. Instead, we get Savannah Guthrie saying, well, Mike, it just seems interesting that these games are held in China where human rights abuses... Wait, one moment. I'm getting word that the January 6th Commission is meeting again. Yes, they're going to be auctioning off an NFT of an artist's rendering of the insurrection. You get my point. We're going to get a tepid media because it's not of interest to them to tell the real truth. They think white supremacy is a bigger threat than communist supremacy. They will dance around their human rights atrocities all day long for this set of sports, but they will cry racism at every NFL game. They will call Donald Trump a dictator, but say nothing about Xi Jinping. They will try to force you to take a vaccine, but never investigate where the pandemic came from. I know that most people, including myself, don't want to hear politics when we are watching sports, but with these Beijing Olympics, it is impossible to avoid, as well as the ironies. From poor quarantine hotels to missing athletes to reporters being dragged off to ski jumps held right alongside nuclear reactors, a diplomatic boycott is simply not enough. It's impotent. Joe Biden has done nothing tough to China because he and Hunter are compromised by China. That's why you don't see any meaningful action. Have you gone to fill up your gas tank lately? Yeah, how's that working out for you? While China builds more coal plants and high-speed trains, we're trying to figure out why bridges are collapsing. Pelosi is telling athletes to just shut up and dribble, or shut up and ski or skate. The proper thing would to have been to have her or Joe Biden go on NBC and make a full lengthy statement about why China is a bad government and why our athletes, as much as we support them, are at risk. That's what NBC should have done. Give them context. They are the national broadcasting company, not the national broadcaster of China. If NBC says, well, we did this huge deal many years ago before we knew Beijing would be chosen, BS. You knew that Beijing was chosen before. You just didn't anticipate how corrupt the IOC would be and that China would let a virus slip out. I would be having Rand Paul on as a guest commentator, or Ennis Freedom. American skating phenom Nathan Chen is the son of Chinese immigrants. Get them on record. Clearly Chen doesn't feel the need to skate for China. It's amazing how NBC doesn't want to be political about Beijing, but they sure are about everything else. There are so many ironies about these Olympics in Beijing, and no amount of snowflakes can fix it. I'm Beau, and that's the show.